Hello, and welcome to another episode of Architecture for Kids podcast. I'm your host, António Capelão. I'm a trained architect, an architectural educator, and founding director of award-winning Architecture for Kids CIC. In this podcast, I'm going to talk to practitioners and creatives that share the same passion as I do, to inspire and to engage children and young people to shape their built environment and the creative industries. The podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the Built Environment Trust, the Thornton Education Trust, and the Welsh School of Architecture, Cardiff University. My guests today are Dr. Ed Green and Kelly Butt. Dr. Ed Green is chair of Bachelor's Year 2 at the Welsh School of Architecture, prior to which he practiced as an architect for 15 years. And is currently working on innovation in housing and retrofit for decarbonization. As Welsh School of Architecture Director of Engagement, Ed developed the Shape My Street program with Kelly Butt and collaborators at Cardiff University, Design Commission for Wales, and Royal Society of Architects in Wales in 2017, and oversaw running of the national competition between the 2017 and 2020, during which time around 60 schools and 2,000 children participated in the program. Kelly Butt is Recruitment and Outreach Officer at Welsh School of Architecture, working with schools to deliver outreach events, providing advice and guidance and insight into higher education to students, working with and inspire children to give them an insight and introducing them to architecture. She works with many children in schools from disadvantaged backgrounds that often don't leave their town, giving them an opportunity to get involved with some of the university projects and seeing their reaction when visiting the Welsh School of Architecture. Kelly and Ed, thank you for coming to talk to me today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Antonio.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us along.
What subjects were you good at school, and what subjects did you most enjoy when you were studying?
Well, for me, definitely PE or games, very sporty and arty, and so art was a favourite of mine.
Without a doubt, it was that slightly weird combination of maths and art that took me to study architecture at university or better off for. Did that influence your career?
I got some work experience within a university, and I never looked back. I've worked for universities ever since. I did a PGCE in further education, which allows me to teach. But I was working at a university at the time, and I loved my job. I kind of fell into this role a little bit. I took on some outreach work, going into primary schools and working with them. And I guess that came from my experience of teaching, and I never really wanted to go into teaching, so I stayed within architecture and look after the outreach side of things for the school.
Yeah, I worked for 15 years as an architect before we moved into work for the university, and architecture is a great discipline because it's very difficult to pin down. And actually people that bring particular skills or interests or passions to it tend to take it as a profession in a slightly different direction. So if art is something that you really enjoy, or the kind of the aspect of creation is something you enjoy, there's lots of scope for that. But also if you're more scientifically minded, or precision or computation are things that you're interested in, then there are areas within architecture where those sorts of skills become really valuable. The other thing that I really like about architecture as a profession is that it does feel like you never quite understand it, you never quite know it. And there's this thing about kind of constantly developing and constantly learning, which and keeps people fresh. You both set up a project here at the Welsh School of Architecture called Shape My Street. Can you tell us a little bit about the initial phases of the project and how you set it up? Yeah, Kelly and I have worked at the Welsh School of Architecture for some time now, and every year we always get approached by schools, in particular by primary schools, who want to introduce their pupils to architecture, to design, to construction, and they don't really know how to do that. And every year we get those kind of approaches, and we end up talking to teachers. We also end up talking to kids, and we kind of identified over a period of time that it was really around key stage 2. So it was when kids are around the ages of maybe between 7 and 11, that the teachers were telling us and the schools were telling us that a lot of them really kind of get switched away from design, switched off from construction, and get the impression that there's nothing out there within those disciplines which is for them. And this really particularly applies to schools in more disadvantaged areas and more remote areas. So what we wanted to do with Shape My Street is set something up that would explain or at least suggest different ways in which design and construction and everything that's related to those disciplines could actually be something that those kids could kind of engage in, and it could provide an opportunity for a career path or a kind of a way to develop in the future. So the primary aim of the competition was all about putting design and construction out of the built environment, just putting it on the radar of as many kids. So we started talking to teachers about it seriously in 2017, and we ran the first year of the competition in 2018. We had 2 really helpful stakeholders. We had the Design Commission for Wales, who do some somewhat similar kind of endeavours. And we also had the RSAW, which is the Welsh branch of the RMBA, the Royal Society of Architects in Wales, as our kind of 2 stakeholders. And in the first year, we weren't quite sure how to pitch it, how it would go. So there was quite a lot of sort of tweaking as we went and development of it. But it ended up, we involved, I think, 25 classes of kids. So about 700, 800 kids were involved. And it culminated then in a really fantastic range of submissions. So each class produced a submission, which I can talk about in a little bit. And with the help of the Design Commission and RSAW, we looked at those submissions and we selected 3 sort of winning classes. And those classes participated then in a kind of a winners event at St Fagans with a range of practitioners, a range of architects also involved in that kind of final event. So it was a really kind of fun way to wrap the thing up. But the most important thing for us, I think, was about involving.
And this program or the framework was the same that you roll out to all schools, or there was kind of variations within the same year?
Yeah, so because we were kind of finding our way as we went, there were a few variations. What we did initially was we set up the kind of framework for the competition. So the idea that there were a series of activities that any class in Wales could get involved in. We broke those activities down into sort of what would effectively be at a minimum 2 half days, so it wasn't too much of a burden for the schools and for the teachers. And then the idea was that any school that wanted to could pick up the resources online, could run it as a competition, and then we select a few of the participating classes to take part in this winners event. But in tandem with that, so there was not a lot of the schools kind of picked it up on their own and ran it independently, which is really important, thinking kind of geographically about the spread of schools in Wales. But then Kelly and her team of ambassadors also went out into a number of schools where schools approached us and where schools made the request and helped support the activities and helped run the activities in the schools just to kind of get them started and get them stuck in. So that was a really nice thing for us to do as well, just kind of meeting the schools and meeting lots of the kids.
Yeah. Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about the activities?
Yeah, so with Shape My Street, it's mainly split into 3 sections. So within the first section is the home activity, where that's the part where we would go into schools and deliver. So with the home, we would get the children to think about things like materials, what they're made out of, the structure of the building. Is it adaptable? Can it be adapted for a family? Can you add on? Can you, we would get them to build a house. So we would go along with what we were calling the nets, and they would work on card to create a building. We'd supply a few different shapes buildings, so they would think about all these styles. We'd do a short presentation, and they would create about their house, and that was the first section that we did with them. The second session then was more about the community, where we would ask them to think about the community, more they would like to see within their community. Again, things like looking at nature, and what they would want there. Would they want schools? Would they want, things like doctors? Would they like parks? And why that might benefit the community? Would they like vehicles, and think about things like transport within? Would they want parking? Would they want vehicles to drive through? Would they like them to stay on the outskirts? Again, the benefit of that. And then we would get them all to talk about as groups, coming together, bringing their houses together and structuring that community and what it would look like. And that second part was continued by the teacher. So we'd mainly go in and do the first part and introduce the second part, and then they would build that community, a larger structure within the classroom. The third part then is when we ask them to complete the logbook. So how they found the project and the things that they liked or disliked about that, and that's the part that they would submit to us, and we would see what they've done as a school.
Did you have to do kind of a training?
We supplied the school with a lot of documentation to explain the whole project and what they needed to cover in order to do that with their class. But when we would go into the schools with our ambassadors, we would brief the teachers on the next stages and what they need to cover. What
was the sort of the community's reaction to the program, the kids?
Well, the nice thing about the two activities that Kelly's described, the first one, which is around each child that participates in the project creatively designing their own sort of ideal home, their vision of what a home might be like in the future. And then part two, which is around putting all of those individual ideas together to create an idea of a community or a neighborhood. There's something really nice in the split of those two activities. And then the first exercise is very much an individual creative endeavor for the kids. But then the second exercise is all about coming together as a class and working very collaboratively to produce this kind of joined up vision of what a community or a neighborhood might be like. And, in order to get schools involved, in order to kind of help schools see the value in the competition and in the activities, we were able to talk about how design and the built environment and architecture are really fantastic from a curriculum point of view, because they cut across those. There's 7 key foundational level areas of learning in primary schools in Wales, and actually the kind of things that the kids were doing for the competition covered 5 of those 7 foundation areas. But I think one of the things that really resonated with the teachers in the classes, there were 2 things. One was that the kids really enjoyed doing something genuinely creative. And sometimes it's quite hard, I think, within the school's curriculum to find space and time to undertake activities which are really genuinely kind of creative and quite open-ended. But the other thing that all of the teachers talked about, the brief that we had, was around the value of the kids working collaboratively. And that thing about creating something independently and creatively, but then having to kind of put the things together, having to have conversations, having to kind of make collective decisions about the nature of the community or the neighborhood they were designing. I think the feeling was that was a particularly strong part.
There was a connection from the start between the setting up of the program and the activities with the curriculum, correct?
Yeah, very much. I mean, the 5 areas of curriculum that feel very connected to the competition are around personal and social development, well-being and cultural diversity. So that's one of them. Then you've got language literacy and communication skills, and then the ability to communicate and to share ideas, that sort of thing. Within mathematical development, the kids are also thinking about density. They're thinking about the size of spaces. They're doing measuring in order to develop their own ideas and understanding things like measurement. Knowledge and understanding of the world, thinking culturally, thinking about, very often these days in primary schools, classes are very kind of culturally mixed places, and having to kind of reconcile ideas across cultures and that sort of thing. And then the last one is creative development. And like I said, having that opportunity to undertake something with a little bit of time, which is a generally creative endeavor, feels like quite an important thing for kids to get to. And the kids themselves were really vocal about how much they enjoy the process.
What was the reaction of the parents here? And what do you think in that kind of landscape, what is the thinking about this sort of work?
We didn't engage directly with the parents, did we?
During lockdown, when we did have a bit more obviously we put it online in lockdown. Well, when we were in the pandemic, when we were locked down, we put it online for children to have something to do outside, and they can think creatively, and they can do the exercise on solely as a family. And the parents submit their logbook directly to us. And I did have a few conversations with them, and they just said that it was a project they really enjoyed and enjoyed doing as a family. And there was a lot of, the way they saw their child learn and get creative was really exciting for them, and how they really enjoyed it. And I think they particularly enjoyed that creative part, because they don't always get that in school. And like, obviously to do that, to take something like this on in their spare time, and really enjoy.
Around the pandemic, how did you develop?
I think the thing that we spotted during the pandemic, obviously there were a lot of, for a period of time, everyone had, for the most part, had their kids at home, or the majority of people did. And quite a lot of households were very hungry for activities that they could meaningfully do at home. When it was becoming very difficult for the teachers to get resources out to kids in their home. So, like Kelly described, we did have quite a lot of households downloading the resources and picking them up. It didn't come together so much in the sense of the kind of a big competition that resulted in finalists and award and all those sorts of things. But I think just the idea, like Kelly described, that people were able to have some of these more creative activities to do in their home and to do with their kids, or to leave their kids to do independently. One of the things that the kids maybe spot, and maybe one of the reasons that the kids enjoy it or have enjoyed it during doing it either at school or at home, is that I think a lot of the activities that are done in the classroom are necessarily itemized. They're very focused, and they're very much kind of led by, the things that are being learned at the time. But the design activities that are embedded in the competition are a lot broader and looser, and they require the kids to think a little bit more holistically and in a slightly more joined up way, kind of across different disciplines.
What is the impact, do you think, of this program in this kids' life, sort of their career choices potentially and life altogether, as well as, if we look at the built environment? So how do you think it will impact these both aspects?
When we started the competition, it was off the back of some really quite sobering conversations with very experienced teachers who were working in very, very tough areas, communities that didn't have a lot of resources or a lot of support. And they were anecdotally talking about entire classes where maybe one kid would go on to become a teacher or a nurse. And, there was this lack of sense of where the kids might go to. So one of the things that we're absolutely hoping to do, and this is quite a loose objective, was to just give the impression that within construction and design and the built environment, there are potential career pathways and there are opportunities for everyone to contribute, regardless of what kind of background and demographic and all of those sorts of things. And then perhaps a little bit more kind of tangibly, we were trying to make sure that, they know where we are. They know that the Welsh School of Architecture is here, that it's based in Cardiff, that it's not scary, that go to university doesn't have to be a scary, intimidating thing, and that it is perhaps more open to people, regardless of leanings and background and things like that, than I think some people had in their heads to start.
What is surprising, though, as well, sorry to add to that, is when you do go into schools, and they're often within their groups, within a classroom, and quite often you see a table of boys that are known as the troublemakers, the naughty ones you got to watch. And the teacher can, on so many occasions, the teachers come up and said, how did they do? And I'm like, that group was amazing. It was the strongest group, they're really focused, they built. And they've been so surprised that they've engaged and they've actually completed tasks and enjoyed it. And I think particularly for boys, it's given them that opportunity to, obviously introducing, this architecture and that creative side, the built environment that they've really enjoyed, because they just can't sit and do the maths or write stories, and they've done amazing, and I guess for them, that group as well, when we go in, they hopefully they will think, oh my God, I can do this, I can do it, and and I did really well at this task. And, you know, maybe just set that little bit in something in their mind to think, well, this is what I enjoy.
About the kids coming to visit the school, what does that visit entail?
More part of Winners' Day. So when we first started the project, our Winners' Day took part in St Fagans, and we invited the 3 schools along to St Fagans to do an exercise, and they had a great day out. But I think it was just after the pandemic, Ed, as part of the Winners' Day, we invited them to the Welsh School of Architecture to work alongside our second year. And that was a project Ed set up. But they're just amazed to come on a bus to Cardiff, to get out of that bus, and they enter the building with their mouths open, just absolutely amazed that what the university looks like. You know, the high ceilings. They come in and they're kind of in awe of the university, and looking at all the work, some of the structures that they can see from the students through the workshops, and looking at the workshops, and you know, they find it amazing. I guess it's quite nice that when they do, it gives them the chance to see the university, because they might not get a chance, especially in disadvantaged areas. They don't come into Cardiff and they don't see university, and they wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. But outside of Shape My Street, we do smaller projects, and quite often have schools in, and it's the same thing.
It wasn't the more kind of conventional situation where you've got a whole bunch of kids and 1 or 2 teachers. There was about 100 kids and about 100 students who were like 19, 20 years old and really engaged and really motivated, which was really helpful. But it was just a completely different balance.
Yeah.
It had an equal number of kids to the students who were running the activities. And I think it just creates a very different sort of dynamic and a very different sort of learning. And hopefully, you know, one of the things that the kids did go away from that day with, like Kelly was saying, was just, you know, having had a conversation with a friendly person who was smiling, who was kind of open to their ideas and interested. And
But once they grow up a little bit, is there some kind of a follow-up scheme?
no, there's no kind of legacy from individuals' pupils' point of view for the project. But I guess aspirationally, you would hope that some of the kids who engaged in the competition and enjoyed aspects of it would be picking up design, would be picking up DT, would be picking up subjects that relate to some of the activities they enjoy. But perhaps more important, longer term, would be thinking about careers that in the built environment in some way that they might actually.
It would be important to cater for that, I suppose.
Yeah, something that we have been exploring that for various reasons hasn't happened yet is an equivalent sort of project, but at the A-level stage. So right when the kids are coming to the end of their time in school, before they think about university or not. Because one of the things that architecture doesn't do terribly well is it doesn't fit into any of the core A-level subjects. So we've been exploring the possibility of some sort of extended project that would allow kids potentially who are undertaking a range of different A-levels to kind of engage with the built environment, to engage with design, or construction or materials or something related to architecture, and do something that interests them, maybe that doesn't fit neatly into one of the core A-level subjects. And one of the potential benefits of that, from the point of view of the School of Architecture, is it would give prospective students an opportunity to demonstrate aptitude for architecture in a way that you actually can't. You know, even if you're doing a certain kind of work in art or in design-based subjects.
What is the impact, for the built environment from bringing in architectural studies or these kind of programs to kids at a younger age?
I wouldn't advocate for example, an A-level in architecture, because as someone who's involved in teaching architecture at a degree level, one of the things that we really enjoy is having students come from a really broad range of backgrounds, cultural contexts, geographic situations, but also with very, very different experiences and skill sets and abilities. And actually the diversity in the student body is what helps to create a really diverse body of work. And, you know, a lot of the enjoyment in architecture comes from projects developing in unexpected directions, you know. And the last thing that I would want to see is all of our students, or a lot of our students, being kind of pushed to the same mold or the same funnel. So I think from that point of view, actually, you know, kind of promoting difference is really important. But I do think that architecture benefits from young people being involved, and particularly from people from a whole range of demographic backgrounds being involved. The idea that it's not the domain of the kind of middle class.
More and more co-design is such a common practice. Why not involve them at younger age?
Expectations around the quality of design generally, but particularly around the quality of our built environments are really low. People, I think in the UK, people have a famously low bar in terms of the standard housing that they expect, for example, in comparison certainly to most of Europe. And I think anything that kind of suggests that we could raise the bar or raise our expectations in terms of the places that we live, the places that we work, the neighborhoods that we kind of operate in.
What is the challenge of setting up, projects such as...
I don't want to put words in Kelly's mouth, but I think the thing that I was acutely aware of in the 3 or 4 years that we ran this competition was that we tried to make it as hands-off as possible. We put all the resources online. We made it so that any school anywhere could have access to the resources and could run the project themselves. But actually, unless there are people who've got an appropriate amount of time available to run the competition, it's almost impossible to gain the traction, and it just doesn't have the momentum. So I think any endeavor like this needs really careful and appropriate resourcing. And without that resourcing, I think it's kind of set up to fail if you're not careful. So I think it's a fantastic thing to have done and to be looking at doing in the future. But it needs...
Yes, I agree with Ed. So we pay ambassadors, or it's my time to go out to schools, but obviously that's quite costly because we cover transport, which is usually locally a taxi, and then for ambassadors, and then we pay them to go into schools and deliver this.
One of the things that really blew us away with not just 1 or 2 of the schools that participated, but a lot, was how much time and energy the guys has put into these projects. We had projects, so Kelly described how each pupil would make a model of their own home, and then those models would get brought to, maybe the size of a shoebox, and then all those models would get brought together to make this kind of vision of a community. And we had really, really detailed models that were literally the size of the downstairs of a small apartment. The amount of care and attention that had been lavished on them was completely amazing. And I think, for classes of kids to get involved in that way, into that level, you really want to have the project set up in a way that the kind of...
Is there a question you'd like me to have asked you that I haven't asked you? And if so, what is that question?
What resources do schools need to participate? Do they need a budget? Do they need, to find money to kind of make this happen? And the answer is definitely no. There are lots of ways that the kids could undertake these sorts of activities. And most of the schools that we went into and really supported, they were using recycled waste. They were using just things that they had kicking around. Some of them were working digitally rather than physically. But really, they're very, very kind of broad, open-ended activities. And there's no precondition or resource that the school specifically needs to participate. But actually, one of the best things about the schools that really kind of flew with this project is that they were tasking the kids with finding their own resources, coming up with their own ideas about what they would do and how they would do.
Thank you very much to my guests today, to all the listeners, and please subscribe to Architecture for Kids podcast and leave your rating and a review. Recommend us to your friends and family, and to find out more about it, visit our websites, antoniocapelão-portfolio.co.uk, buildingcentre.co.uk, thorntoneducationtrust.org, cardiff.ac.uk, and follow us on Instagram, Arch4Kids Twitter, Antcapelão, LinkedIn, Antcapelão, CAPELAO, and please join me again next week for another episode of Architecture for Kids podcast, brought to you in collaboration with the Built Environment Trust, the Thornton Education Trust, and the Welsh School of Architecture, Cardiff University.